Hey there, I'm Zetetic. I'd like you to pretend that you're me for a moment. Let's go back in time to the summer of 2004. You're wandering around a GameStop that used to be a Funko Land before they were bought out, and so people in the neighborhood still call it that. While looking at the Game Boy Advance section, you spot some intriguing box art for something simply called Fire Emblem. You are unaware that there were 6 Fire Emblem games that came out before this one, but a man in the background with bizarre proportions catches your attention. Something so odd about his legs. So you pick the box from the shelf and bring it to the counter so that you can buy it. As the guy takes the anti-theft crap off of it, he casually mentions the store is selling the official game guide too. But you don't have enough money for that yet, because employers in the US are allowed to pay people under 20 years old below minimum wage for the first 90 days of employment. And, totally by coincidence, summer break is about 90 days long. So you pass on the guide for now. In any case, you're now the new owner of Fire Emblem the Blazing Blade. Congratulations, I guess. Now you spend more than a few hot summer days utilizing your impressive strategies. Marcus wastes experience, obviously, so you only send him up with no weapons to tank attacks and bait the enemy closer to Rebecca, who just needs the levels more. Your dad would take breaks between burning through a carton of cigarettes in a week and watching the same old awful action/propaganda movies over and over again to yell at you about how you're using up all the AA batteries. So you stop resetting for dead units halfway through the game in a desperate attempt to conserve battery power. Then you reach Living Legend, and as you move your remaining units around, you stumble on a hidden item in the desert. Wow, an ocean seal, you say to yourself. This will be great for Dart. I wonder what else I can give to that lovable pirate around here. And so you make it a point to comb the entire desert with all your remaining units, because although the little girl in the house says the treasure is around the bones, you just found something out in the open. No fossils here at all, traitor. And now you've confirmed that Fire Emblem will outright lie to you. In a series with good endings placed behind obscure conditions, characters that die if you don't support them enough, and difficulty modes that give accessibility the middle finger and take out quality of life improvements, hidden treasure is among the worst mechanics featured in Fire Emblem. The misconceptions spawned by players over the decades is a permanent testament to just how confusing the mechanic is. And when I'm done dragging hidden treasure into a field and beating it to death, my hope is that you will agree that hidden treasure had it coming. So let's define what hidden treasure is. In 8 Fire Emblem games, it's possible to move a unit onto a certain predefined tile, or rectangular set of tiles, and receive a rare item, or in one game an immediate stat boost. There's no reliable indication in-game that the tile will provide this reward. It wouldn't be called hidden treasure otherwise, now would it? Besides that, there are slight differences in how this mechanic is implemented between games, but for the purposes of this video, the differences are often so small that mentioning all of them here will be unnecessary. I'll get into some of those differences later on when they happen to be relevant. But first, let's talk about walkthroughs. Let's imagine you're playing a Fire Emblem game with hidden treasure in it blind. Getting all the hidden items by yourself on purpose with no knowledge of how the hidden treasure mechanic works isn't possible. Most of the games with hidden treasure hint at where at least some of it is, but the mechanics around how to get it are practically impossible to figure out on your own. Not only that, but in-game dialogue and hints never reveal all of the treasures a map has. You could get lucky and find every single treasure over the course of a normal first playthrough of a map, but given where you'll have to move your units, the chances of this happening are negligible. So realistically speaking, the only way you're going to get all hidden treasure is through opening a walkthrough and learning where the treasure is and how to get it. Given how widespread access to the internet is nowadays, it's easy to take the online resources with maps and instructions that exist today for granted. Places like Fire Emblem WOD, the Fire Emblem Wiki, Serenus Forest, and Triangle Attack have treasure maps for some or all of the games. These sites also accurately explain the formulas in each game that calculate the hidden treasure find rate. But, at the risk of sounding like an old man telling kids he had to walk 15 miles uphill to school back in his day, or whatever nonsense old people say nowadays, the internet was not always a single click away. Back in my day, I had to go to the library and sign up to use the computer and wait for my turn to use it, and even then I only got 30 minutes, so... oh, damn it, I'm doing that thing. Even if we pretend that the internet was widely accessible, finding accurate information on hidden treasure was difficult. Let's search for some hidden treasure info from 2003 to 2004, which covers the spread of months that Fire Emblem was released in different regions. Here's a NeoSeeker post titled Desert Bones. In chapter I can't remember, called Living Legend, you fight in a desert to aid Pent. There is an obviously abused girl in a house who tells you that there is a secret treasure buried near the bones. Is this true? Are you supposed to dig it up? And if so, how? One person answered, all you have to do is send a unit with a high luck rating out and just walk to the space you think something may be in. Wrong, but interesting theory. Let's keep this reply in mind. Anyway, someone else replied with a now broken link because GeoCities is dead. So I looked it up on a GeoCities archive. It contained a pretty accurate treasure map except for one problem. The range where the body ring is found was shifted one column to the right. Otherwise, it's great. But without accurate knowledge of how to find these items, players could send units to those locations, not get the item, and think that the map is more inaccurate than it actually is. It's easy to see why many people people relied on printed walkthroughs and word of mouth between other friends who play the game. Because I'm a nerd who collects garbage, I happen to have a guide for FE7. So let's have a look, shall we? Turning to page 64 for Living Legend on Elowood mode, we see a treasure map. It's accurate at least, so that's nice. Page 108 features the Hector mode information, but the treasure is still marked in the same spot. No problems there. Back to Elowood mode, there's a small section here named after a reference to a bizarre conspiracy theory that asserts Paul McCartney has been dead since 1966. Anyway, it says that units with high luck are more likely to find treasure. This is wrong. In the Blazing Blade, non-thieves have a flat 9% chance to find items, and those odds are not affected by luck. Luck is a factor in the Sacred Stones, but obviously this is not a guide for that game. Now, do you remember that person trying to help out in the Desert Bones thread? I told you to keep it in mind, so you better remember. Yeah, they got that from the official guide, and it's wrong. Also, the guide doesn't even begin to mention thieves on the Elowood mode page. They do have a 100% chance to find hidden items, so you'd think that would be pretty relevant. Oddly enough, it does mention thieves on the Hector mode page, but the guide still claims that luck matters for finding treasure. Even a guide for the game where luck is a factor doesn't mention thieves getting treasure. It does recommend bringing a thief, but only in the context of stealing in the guiding ring. So you can see how this gets pretty confusing. My main point here is that not even the guide's authors knew how hidden treasure worked, and to be fair to them, strategy guide writing is, by all accounts, difficult work. Not only is it a meticulous task to get information right, but presenting it in a somewhat entertaining way with eye-catching art and interesting side notes is also required. And games often change at the last minutes after guides went to print. Given the similarity of FE7's and FE8's engines, it's quite possible that FE7's hidden treasure was designed to rely on luck, but the developers changed it. Or maybe FE7's code intended to account for luck but failed due to some sort of bug. If the only way to learn as much as possible about hidden treasure at the time of the game's release was to either own one of these guides or know someone who does, and even that information wasn't perfect, then that raises uncomfortable questions. For example, why does hidden treasure exist? Let's speculate. Some people call hidden treasure an Easter egg. I disagree. Easter eggs in games just don't affect gameplay like hidden treasure does. Easter eggs are not just any hidden secret in a game, they're unexpected messages and references to other media that often happen to be hidden. Owain shouting random Fire Emblem references is an Easter egg. Hidden treasure doesn't qualify. I'm not trying to split hairs here, it's just that an Easter egg has a somewhat specific definition, and hidden treasure just falls outside of it. And I think it's important to use clear vocabulary when talking about game design. Other people say hidden treasure is intended to be a random prize you get if you're lucky enough to stumble around the map and find it. I disagree with that too. The series emphasizes strategic movement and some degree of efficiency, and that clashes with the fact that so many hidden treasures are hidden off of the typical beaten path that units will follow over the course of a chapter. All of the hidden treasure in FE4 is well out of the way of the normal routes that units travel on to complete the map, and are usually located on dead ends that have no strategic value. FE6 puts the boots in the guiding ring on your way to the gates, but all the other treasure requires a significant detour. In FE7, there's a very good chance as a new player that you'll complete the map by accident, as Pent will clear the left half of the map before you have a chance to bring a thief to every single treasure spot. Many of FE8's treasures are scattered around feasible routes, although the silver card is super out of the way. FE9 sticks Stefan in a corner you would never even think to send a unit to, let alone a Laguz unit, unless you knew hidden treasure existed. FE10's treasure is just scattered all over the place across multiple maps, and so many of them are on a single tile, so you have to get lucky with positioning and your biorhythm. In my opinion, the best treasure system is in FE12. At least that game lets you discover treasure 100% of the time as long as you stick any unit in the right place. But besides the visually distinct caves, you still kinda need to know where to look in the desert. It seems like developers knew how game-breaking hidden treasure items were, and went out of their way to hide them so that you wouldn't get most of them by accident. So far, we're assuming good intentions, but there's also the explanation that's a bit more sinister. Hidden treasure is part of a grift. Guides are advertised as containing secrets that you need to master the game. You want to be good at Fire Emblem, don't you? Well, for just $15 you can get this guide. Here's the map to find the treasure that we buried. It's just a coincidence that these items make the game a lot easier if you're willing to use them, and Nintendo's logo is on all of the printed guides, so you know they're getting a cut. Now, maybe that sounds cynical to you, but corporations have a long history of creating problems and selling the solutions to them. If you disagree that this happens, or if you believe that Nintendo is not like other corporations, consider this. This design method is no different from the more recent Fire Emblem games that get easier the more money you spend on them. I'm referring to downloadable content, or DLC. Things like exponential growth and Golden Gaff and Awakening. Resources and experience and classes earned from various DLC maps and Fates and Echoes, and the Chalice of Beginnings and all the extra stat boosters in Three Houses, all break their games to varying degrees. And all it takes to unlock the power of DLC is some extra money and perhaps a little bit of extra time playing the game. I won't get into this too much because Professor Bopper already did an excellent video on how Fire Emblem's later entries have unbalanced highest difficulties, and he touches on the influence of DLC in experiencing these games. You should watch it if you haven't already. But a strategy guide that told you how to get items that made the game easier effectively effectively served the same purpose in the 2000s as DLC does today. The only real distinction is that guides were sold within the context that they were intended to make it easier for players to access everything the game offers, but DLC is additional content that makes the game more accessible overall. But as far as hidden items go, it's a distinction without a difference. But let's take a step back from the soulless corporate profit angle for a bit. At the end of the day, I don't work at Nintendo and I don't have an uncle who does. So at best, it's educated guessing based on how corporations corporate. Besides, guides are collector's items with neat artwork and interesting curiosities. Like the FE4 guidebook has an interview with Shozo Kaga at the end. That's pretty neat. And it would be hypocritical of me to say that they don't have some value, at least sentimentally. I don't know why the Thracia guide has the Parthenon on it, by the way. It's in Attica, not Thrace. Get on my level, Nintendo. So let's just assume the best of intentions. The game developers were in a good mood and decided to sprinkle some nice items here and there in the hopes that you'll be pleasantly surprised when you stumble onto one. After all, the game's beatable without any of the items, right? So it's fine to include a little treat for an adventurous player to stumble on here and there, and maybe that's all there is to it. They're just random, quirky little things for a lucky player to enjoy. How nice of them. Fire Emblem is designed by accident after all, but even if that were true, this is also bad game design. The fact that you're able to beat the game with or without hidden treasure isn't a good measure of whether hidden treasure as a feature is intrusive or not. The real problem is that knowledge of hidden treasure, or lack of said knowledge, affects a player's agency, the player's ability to make choices. A strategy RPG experience ultimately comes down to short and long-term decision-making, and hidden treasure does absolutely nothing to inform the choices of a player that doesn't know about it. It exists solely for the benefit of those who already know it exists in the first place. Fire Emblem games will always provide different experiences to a player that knows what they're doing, we'll call them the veteran, and a player that doesn't. We'll call them the newbie. Veterans know that hidden treasure exists, they have access to an accurate treasure map, and they know how to pick up the treasure. So basically, their entire playthrough is influenced by obtaining and having these items. If you know that a silver card is coming up in a couple of chapters, then you might minimize your purchases until you get it, since a silver card effectively doubles your spending power. If you know that there's a warp staff ahead, then you can prepare one of your units to use it by getting their staff rank up or promoting them, and so on and so forth. The possibilities that are open to you with this foreknowledge are pretty much endless, since a lot of these items are very flexible. While veterans can choose to skip hidden treasure, a newbie doesn't have the luxury of a choice. This introduces some complications. After all, the newbie can't learn what these items do if they never encounter them, and they'll be stuck at a certain skill level at the game until they figure it out. And if they do happen to randomly pick up an item, they may get trapped in the pitfall of thinking it's too awesome to use, as TV tropes would say, and just hoard it because they don't want to waste the item without knowledge of how to use it best. Since the games usually give no specific indication that the found item was a hidden treasure, that also introduces uncertainty about the item's source. Was it random? Does that always happen when I move a unit to this tile? Did I get it by killing that enemy whose inventory I forgot to check? Was the unit lucky? Am I, the player, just lucky? To Intelligent Systems' credit, in games where a thief has a 100% chance to find an item, it often makes sense to deploy a thief in chapters with hidden treasure because the enemies have stealable items that a newbie can see on the enemy stat screen during battle preparations. So a newbie might get lucky while moving their thief into position to steal stuff. The most obvious exception to me is the Feral Frontier in FE9, where the only stealable items are vulneraries. The one reason to field a thief here is to get the hidden treasure, but if a newbie doesn't know about it and doesn't need to steal vulneraries, then they probably won't deploy a thief. A veteran, on the other hand, will. FE4 is the biggest offender when it comes to hidden treasure, since not only do you have to know which tile out of the 4,096 tiles to send a unit to, you also have to know which unit to send. And the games give zero indication through dialogue on what to do. Crack open an official strategy guide, however, and, well, I can't read Japanese, but I know a treasure map when I see one. Now, obviously, a newbie's experience differs from a veteran's outside of finding hidden treasure, too. For example, efficient play is something that takes practice to hone. Knowing which units are worth investing in or not is more in a veteran's domain. But none of these differences are so easily resolved by throwing in a guide, whether it's the somewhat inaccurate printed guides or the information available on the internet today. With a guide, a newbie's experience is basically equal to a veteran's as far as hidden treasure goes. They might not have a good sense of the true value of some of the hidden items at first, but a newbie will learn once they get the items and start to use them. When an aspect of a game can be rendered a non-issue through getting outside information about it, the reasoning for making that feature so obscure starts to look bad. There's no reason to hide these items except for the fact that a game guide is going to be sold as an accompaniment to the game that will reveal what's hidden in the first place. And when that guide can't properly explain how to get the treasure, and the game can't do it either, and the only thing that you can do is trial and error until you figure out how it works, or wait for someone else to do that and post their results on the internet, that's bad design on so many levels. So why gate the items behind meta-knowledge of the game? Wouldn't the final product be better if the design incorporated the presence of these items and weaved them into the games in a thoughtful way? If Intelligent Systems ever remakes a game with hidden treasure in it, they'll have to decide whether to carry the mechanic over as is, remove it entirely, or alter it in some way. There's a lot of excitement in the Fire Emblem community over speculation about a remake, especially for games that never released outside of Japan. People seem excited about remakes for FE4 and FE6, as well as a remaster or remake of FE9. These games also have hidden treasure, and it would be odd to see hidden treasure return in a remake of those games, considering that Intelligent Systems has left it out of the last few entries of the series. There seems to be a subtle acknowledgement that hidden treasure doesn't work. One alternative to hidden treasure is featured in Fire Emblem Gaiden's remake, Shadows of Valentia, which basically uses the protagonist's perspective within an explorable area to hide items against the backdrop. As the player, you use the game's cursor to find items, as long as you can locate them with your human eyeballs. This is an interesting way to provide useful items to the player, but as someone with a visual impairment, don't worry, it's minor, at least for now, my interaction with the system in darker areas is to move the cursor around at random until I see bright white text pop up. A system like this will always raise questions about accessibility, especially compared to the more visually distinct chests in Gaiden. Event tiles are an option, albeit kind of a lazy one. These are tiles found while playing Awakening and Fates, and 3 houses too as long as you're online, that give various things to the player, sometimes including items. Like every overblown feature in Awakening, future games toned it down a bit, but marking hidden treasure tiles as sparkly things doesn't make any sense. That just turns those tiles into treasure chests that can be opened without a chest key. At that point, you may as well put the item in a chest. You can always turn to romhacks to look for improvements on the original games, and the best implementation of hidden treasure that I've seen is in a classic, The Last Promise. In Chapter 3, visiting the southeastern village results in a conversation that points you towards the location of an Elysian whip. This creates a sort of treasure hunt dynamic within the game where you can collect clues. That treasure hunt effect can be achieved in other ways too, like through in-game items that are visual treasure maps that a player has to interpret if they want to find something. Just have a usable item that reveals a treasure map as a PNG on the screen. You could also go the item finder route, similar to Pokemon, and have an equipable item that makes tiles on the map glow or provides hints on how close you are to a treasure every time you move the unit with the item, kind of like playing hot and cold with the game. Call it a divining rod or Anna's shovel or whatever you need to do to make it fit into the setting. You could direct the player to fulfill the conditions needed to get the hidden treasure with a side quest that gives the player some vague but followable instructions, as well as some context for why the side quest exists in the first place. Oh, this guy in Verdane Castle is telling Lex to check out the lake, or maybe Arden's requesting permission from Sigurd to let him go to the beach because he's sick of all the bosses with pav eyes here. That would be fine because it sets up an optional side objective that calls for specific movements and forces the player to factor that sidetrack into their overall plan for the chapter if they want the item. You could set things up so that the enemy has already found the treasure and is running off with it, like in various romhacks. Seven Siblings comes to mind as hanging a lampshade over hidden treasure's existence in other games while pointing out the enemy units with the treasure. Other ROM hacks like Vision Quests and the Four Kings feature enemies that run away with droppable treasure, and your job is to try and kill them. This is an interesting approach as it provides a timed side objective that is fun to pursue. It also encourages the player to pick and choose which items they prioritize, meaning their choices actually matter, especially in the event that they can't get or don't need to get every item. You could even include dialogue between characters that a player is likely to reach that rewards an item outright. For example, on the Blue Lions route of 3 houses, the Dimitri Felix B support gives Felix a Sword of Zoltan. The event isn't hidden at all, it's just a part of the established support system, and it's very hard to miss provided that you have a basic understanding of how the game works. You could also use map conversations like in FE4 to distribute items. Hidden treasure is just one of many problems that the Fire Emblem series as a whole struggles with when it comes to opaque mechanics and weird surprises. Knowledge about a game that you already bought should not be behind a literal paywall of a guide, and it's fortunate that the era of that nonsense has come to an end. Now we can only hope that it stays in the abyss of history, and that Intelligent Systems finds a good way to move on in a remake. I hope that if SRPG designers outside of Intelligent Systems think about including hidden treasure in their games, they consider that it's not an intuitive mechanic in any of the games it's implemented in, and it never will be unless the player has a treasure map, and that will either come in the form of in-game hints about hidden treasure's location, or out-of-game materials like guides. And this advice doesn't just apply to professional game studios, it applies to hobbyists and ROM hackers as well. If you're a game designer, you want to be in control of the information your players receive about your game, so take the extra effort to make your game a little more fun and a little less obscure. People tend to remember negative experiences more readily than positive ones, and you have the tools at your disposal to increase the good memories your players make when playing your game and decrease the bad ones. As a player of these games, my overarching point is that it's important to demand and expect improved design, even from games you love, so that it's easier for more people to fall in love with them too. As much as I dunk on the series in this video, I don't hate Fire Emblem because it has hidden treasure in it. That would be silly. I like Fire Emblem despite its flaws and want the series to be better so that more people will play these wonderful games and have a good time with it. That's it for me. Special thanks to Peeves Latias, who inspired me to make a video about hidden treasure throughout the Fire Emblem series a while back. It was a bit of a different idea back then, more focused on analyzing hidden treasure throughout the series, but the idea kind of morphed into this video the more I thought about how annoying hidden treasure was. Anyway, thank you for watching, and have a good one.